they have no idea how this building came down. So let's look at the steel and find out what happened. But it was gone, prompting editor-in-chief building fire expert, what's his name? Bill Manning, to cite crucial evidence that could answer the many questions on the slow boat to China, and showing an astounding ignorance of government officials to the value of a thorough scientific investigation. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately. Do we have experts that corroborate this controlled demolition? Here's Danny Jawenko, the top European controlled demolition expert. 27 years in the business. He says, it starts from below. They've simply blown away the columns. It's a controlled demolition. A team of experts did this. Professional work, without a doubt. And AE911Truth structural engineer Kamal Obaid, who cites a localized failure in a steel frame building like World Trade Center 7 cannot cause a catastrophic collapse like a house of cards without a simultaneous and pattern loss of several of its columns at key locations within the building. So the question is Building 7 supportive? If the evidence in Building 7 and its debris and its eyewitnesses and videos, is this direct evidence of explosive destruction? Again, fire can't account for any one of these features. Along with this corroborating evidence that we have, we believe that it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And this is why our literature now throws a third beam up into the New York City evening skyline, which represents the unexplained freefall destruction of Building 7, which is the key to justice for the victims that were killed in the Twin Towers. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the evidence surrounding the Twin Towers and hear from
Gene Corley. Fire caused it.
The official story.
It was the combination of the impact load doing great damage to the building, followed by the fire that caused collapse. We need to look for types of fireproofing that can take the impact and can stand up to the impact and stick to the steel after the impact.
Again, fires have ravaged high-rises well beyond the 2 or 3 hour fire protection rating that these sprayed-on fire-resistant materials have. Why? Because these are huge heat sinks that draw that heat away. The fire protection is not, as it turns out, that critical for these heavy structural steel members. Do we have a sudden onset of destruction at the location of the jet plane impacts? Let's compare the features of the Twin Towers and see how they stack up. Of course, this would be produced by explosions, for which we'll be looking for witnesses that hear those sounds, that see those flashes of light.
Dave Thomas.
The reason that the truth movement needs thermite is there were obviously no explosion sounds, and when you have a controlled demolition, there are big explosions that are, many, many decibels that can be heard miles away, and they go boom, 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 and we didn't hear those.
We didn't hear those? Well, let's take a look at what came out in August of 2005 from the City Fire Commissioner Thomas Von Essen, who recorded 500 of his first responders, and this material was sequestered by Mayor Giuliani. We didn't know about it until August, until the New York Court State of Appeals overruled them. Why were they keeping it secret? Is it because 118 of these 500 were documenting sounds of explosions and flashes of light? Let's see. We felt the ground shake. You could see the tower sway, and then it just came down. All of a sudden, the ground just started shaking. It shook my bones. Shortly before the first tower came down, I remember feeling the ground shaking. Why is the ground shaking in what may be 2,000 feet away from what is the beginning of a gravitational collapse with large gradual deformations? Somewhere around the middle of the World Trade Center, there was this orange and red flash coming out. Initially, just one flash. Then this flash just kept popping all the way around the building, and the building had started to explode. Let's take a look and see what the North Tower is doing relative to a known controlled demolition on the left and see if there is any similarity. Slow it down. About half speed. We can start controlled demolitions from anywhere in the building. We'll take a closer look at that in a moment. That's when I saw the building coming down. Pop, pop, pop. Saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. No fires on floors 10 and 15. What are these flashes doing? Flashes are an indication of explosive detonation. I saw low-level flashes. We actually heard the pops. You heard the pops. It was blowing out on all four sides. With each popping sound, it was initially an orange and then a red flash came out of the building. Then it would just go all the way around the building on both sides.
Michael Shermer.
And if you Google any keywords like intentionally demolished buildings or buildings, demolished, whatever, you'll get hundreds of videos of buildings intentionally brought down. None of them fall like the World Trade Center buildings fell. They all fall from the bottom up, and the World Trade Center buildings fell from the top down.
The buildings can fall, or be caused to fall, from anywhere they are designed to be fall, particularly if you're attempting to perform a deceptive controlled demolition to be blamed on jet plane impacts and fires.
John Magnuson.
Several of the upper floors fell onto the next lower floor that was still intact. And once that happens, there's going to be an instant overload situation, and then it will fail. And then that will drop down to the next floor into another instant overload situation. And so the floors just progressively collapse down all the way to the bottom.
The problem with what Dave Thomas is saying is we have measured...
John Magnuson.
Was that John Magnuson?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the problem with what he's saying also is there's no evidence of a dynamic load. He's saying that the building dropped, and if you drop something on something, it can exert more load than its own weight. And the way that happens is it has to decelerate at a greater rate than gravity. That part of that deceleration involves velocity loss because it's transferring kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is 1/2 mv squared. It has to lose velocity to transfer kinetic energy. And it has to decelerate at a rate much greater than gravity in order to apply an amplified load. The North Tower has been measured. In the last few years, many people have measured it. It never decelerates. It never decelerates. And the same point I'm going to make, the French perform a demolition technique called vernage, where they don't use explosives. You can use natural gravity, but it has to decelerate. They take out 2 or 3 floors with hydraulic rams. They push the columns out of the way. When that upper section comes down and impacts the lower section, guess what? Every single time, in every single vernage demolition, we measure severe deceleration. That's not true in the case of the North Tower, which we can measure. The South Tower is a little tougher because it tilts hard. It never decelerates. That means what's actually happening is the legs are being taken out from under it. And these guys just want to go around and say there was an impact. They have no evidence of it. The evidence is on the contrary.
Thank you, Tony. Let's compare these explosions in the South Tower. Is there any similarity? Is there enough similarity to warrant a new investigation into the possible use of explosives? Should the hypothesis of explosive controlled demolition be looked at seriously? I saw flash, flash, flash. Then it looked like the building came down. What did these gentlemen experience?
We started one. Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated. They were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down.
In fact, let's just compare these, the destruction of the World Trade Center tower to a known explosion, a volcanic eruption in the Tongan Sea on the upper right. A known explosion on the right. What are we looking at? Upward, outward, arching streamers, thick, pulverized concrete suspended in the air, symmetry, a geometry almost like fireworks. Now, does it look anything like you think a gravitational collapse mechanism might be expected? Now, I missed this 4 years ago. I wasn't thinking... 9 years ago, I wasn't thinking at all. I was in a state of shock, probably like the most of the rest of you. I didn't want to think about it.